Once it took tanks, bombs and planes to take control of a foreign country and its people. Well, the old-fashioned way still works, as we can see in Ukraine, but there's a much cheaper and easier way to do it. It's called propaganda, fake news or disinformation.
In a world where people live their lives on social media, the feeds they get are more effective than tanks. The posts they consume do a far better job than bombs.
Well, twisting elections, igniting civil conflicts or shattering international alliances. It takes quiet and visible campaigns in cyberspace. And there you are, mission accomplished.
Well, not quite. The mission is not yet accomplished, but it's well underway, as we can see. And Europe is one of the main targets.
Is it ready to strike back? Let's try to find out.
Welcome to the special edition of Anatomy of Disinformation. Maia, Mazurkiewicz.
And Grzegorz Nawrocki, and we are joined by our guests in today's program, and they are Alexandre Alaphilippe from Disinfo Lab. Welcome to the program.
Welcome, thank you.
Thanks for joining.
Joanna Rochozińska, the independent expert. Thank you. Welcome.
And member of the European Parliament, Michał Szczerba from Poland. Welcome to the program.
Welcome.
There are plenty of techniques Russia deploys to interfere in foreign countries. Before we start our discussion, let's just remind ourselves of the most recognized cases of the last months.
Let's take a look.
This is just a selection of recent Russian operations and hybrid attacks in Europe. Deliberate damage to undersea gas pipelines and communication cables between Finland, Estonia and Sweden.
There's a lot of malintent coming from the Russian Federation at this particular moment.
Fake media websites mimicking outlets such as Le Monde and The Guardian spread pro-Kremlin disinformation that is with especially anti-EU and anti-Ukraine narratives. The Moldova referendum also saw election interference with cyberattacks, deepfakes and manipulation to undermine Maia Sandu and the EU referendum.
This is a relatively new phenomenon for Moldova. This is a dangerous phenomenon for any democracy.
During the Georgia parliamentary elections, Telegram and TikTok campaigns pushed anti-Western, anti-European narratives. The Georgian Dream victory was described as influenced by a Russian special operation.
They're testing something new, which is using the elections as an instrument which allows them to consolidate their proxies.
Industrial arson in the Czech Republic, Lithuania and the UK coordinated attacks on defense and logistics facilities executed by local criminal intermediaries. Cyberattacks on Polish political infrastructure targeting party websites before the 2025 elections.
Poland is the most attacked country in the European Union today. It has the most incidents. Russia will deliberately interfere in the Polish presidential elections.
The key narratives used by Russian influence campaigns describe the EU as corrupt, divided, attacking traditional values and sovereignty. NATO is described as escalating conflicts. According to Russian propaganda, mainstream media cannot be trusted. The real truth can be found on alternative platforms.
Well, the list could be much, much longer here, obviously.
But we also see that it's much bigger now than it was before.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's just all the time we had for it. But can you explain to me one simple thing? Why is it that years and years after we talk and discuss this thing, we cannot get control of a situation, an incident like the one in Romania? Why can't we prevent it? What's wrong with us?
I think we cannot prevent things without touching systemically on the issues that are underlying. So if we look at what happened in Romania, what is very clear, and it's been documented by reports for French counter-disinformation agency Vigilum, saying like basically TikTok said, we built a bomb, which is a recommender system. The bomb exploded because people gamed the algorithm.
But we knew the bomb was being constructed, didn't we?
We knew the bomb was being constructed.
So
that was the mega election year. We've been saying about it for years before.
Exactly, and that's the main issue that we need to look at right now, is how these coordinated attacks are taking abuse of all these bombs that are recommender systems right now in all the platforms in Europe. And what do we do about that?
But aren't we doing that already?
Well, I think that there also has to be a more holistic approach to it, right? Because control of the platforms or regulation of the platforms and understanding the technical delivery of disinformation is one thing, but you can't neglect the underlying issues that make people believe these things, right? Which means that there's a lack of trust in media, there's a lack of trust in elected officials, and that ends up being kind of like the sticky glue to which all of the disinformation can cling. And so there has to be a more
Is this a lost battle for us?
approach.
Is this a lost battle for us?
It's never a lost battle, yeah? It just has to actually, maybe it's like alcoholism. You have to admit you have a problem before you can start working on it.
And that's the thing, because the erosion of trust is very much visible. Do politicians understand it's a huge challenge?
Yes, we do understand, but the issue is, are we prepared?
Shouldn't we be already?
The EU is stepping up, but of course, for many years in this building, in this house of democracy, disinformation was treated as a false information. Now we know that it's something more important. It's about strategy to divide people. It's about breaking the truth and breaking the trust, which is very important.
No, I mean, the diagnosis is fine, Mr. Szczerba, but what about medicine for it? What about some cure for it? Because we know what you're saying, but we do little with that knowledge.
Yeah, we know these examples exactly. Grzegorz, of course, we did have it in Poland about vaccinations, about migration, about anti-Ukrainian mood, which appear on TikTok and YouTube. So we know what we deal with.
But do we understand it's a war? Because it's the war on our hearts and our minds, and on the hearts and minds of our citizens.
It's a front line, I agree. So we have to build resilience. In this parliament, we created a special committee, or we call it European Democracy Shield. So we are going to work with the European Commission to be prepared and to respond in a real time. Right. This is very important. In a real time, and we cannot allow that Romania case will appear in one of our countries.
Right, however, it already did, right? And was appearing previously as well in Moldova and Georgia. And right now, well, we're having a lot of other elections to come, and we've been seeing disinformation in Polish elections and German elections. And both you, Joanna, and Alexander, you've been working a lot with the civil society to actually counter disinformation and bring the further strategies. So how is that working for you? And do you think that there is a good cooperation in between civil society and politicians?
I think there's a beginning of cooperation. I think it's a very complex domain, as it was said. We're looking both at monitoring, understanding, detecting, attributing a coordinated attack of disinformation, like who did it, who was the main intermediaries that conducted it, was paid, etc. So you have a lot of analysis that can be done. The thing is, if you have an attack coming on you, always using the same vector, you can try to defend the same space all the time, or you can try to shut down actually the vulnerability. And the vulnerability that we have right now is that we have very little transparency and a lot of opacity on the platform side about how they distribute content, who was paid to distribute this content, and actually you can put any kind of bogus information there. And that's what we've seen in TikTok elections. And it can also happen offline the platform and can game the platform.
Can I just interrupt you? I've got an impression, correct me if I might be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've got a fantastic knowledge that we are toothless in a way as a European Union to execute this knowledge. Is that correct to say?
I mean, I think that there's a huge body of work that's been done, right? But it's kind of going back to your original question in terms of the cooperation between civil society and whether it's governments or it's politicians, whether that
between
kind of
this chair and this chair.
Pretty much.
It's a work in progress, I think, right? I mean, and part of the difficulty is that disinformation has been securitized and weaponized, which in a way means that there's a boundary around what civil society can do, or is how would you say, invited to do for the governments, basically, and that cooperation could be better. And the other aspect, a little bit, we have enough of a body of knowledge also to stop looking at things in the past, but actually understand the case studies and look forward, right? And so there's a lot more to be working towards the anticipation of they call it pre-bunking, but I wouldn't even say that, but understanding where the fissures are going to be going forward. And I think that's probably underutilized now and hopefully can be accelerated.
So okay, go on.
And that's a question, because we are right now talking of how to measure disinformation and influence operations, but what about narratives? That's a main and key challenge. Is the European Union holding the narrative or only reacting to the ones that put in place?
Yes.
I think the narrative question is less important than the capacity to actually work in the information environment. Right now, it's not about who's going to win the narrative battle if you have no transparency on how these narratives are distributed. So if you actually don't know how platforms are putting the content online and what are they pushing and why and to whom, how can you prepare a strategy of narratives? You're actually playing a game
so we're
where
losing
you
it.
don't
We're
have
losing
things.
it. We're losing this game.
So
we are losing this game.
We are not losing this game. We are losing this game because we don't want to fight.
Well,
I think that's that way.
I think that's the key.
We want to be ethical,
excuse me, that's a question to me, Hostaba. Why do you not want to fight? I'm asking you on behalf of...
We do have good initiatives within the EU. For instance, EU versus Disinfo platform, which monitor and which shows in a real time what disinformation is. So this is a very good
but if I understand Alexandre
instrument tool we can use.
And too late. Do I understand it correctly?
I think it's a question of, you mentioned the chairs that were missing. I think there are two chairs missing here. We're a chair of European Commission, which is regulating.
That's true.
Which is the regulator and has open proceeding and investigation against platforms, and it needs to go through. And there is a chair missing.
In the next episode, yes.
Where are the platforms here? They are the ones recommending this. That's where the crime is happening. On a daily basis. Why are they not here? They should be on that spot and they should explain how they work, because we have no information about it.
And they don't do enough, yeah?
And the European Commission was trying to push the platforms and to regulate them. They are going out of what is already kind of decided. But at the same time, how we can more pressure the platforms. If Zuckerberg then is coming to Europe and saying, well, we're going to leave with Meta platforms of the European Union if you're going to regulate us.
Let them leave. I'm going to be honest. If they don't want to respect the European law, then they leave. I think we are a sovereign continent and we have sovereign countries with laws. So I'm not interested in applying the First Amendment as a European citizen. We are in Europe. These companies have subsidies and filials and sister companies and daughter companies in Europe. They have to obey the European law. That's how it is. That's the rule of law. If we are not capable of applying the law in our own countries, then we have a much more serious issue than disinformation.
And Michal, do you think that European citizens will allow to leave the platforms, or are they going to change the politicians if that's going to happen?
Europeans like platforms and like social media. But of course, coming back to your question about freedom of speech. Freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of lies. So this is very important, especially in the times when disinformation is used as a weapon. And we have to understand how the platforms work. Algorithms are not voting, but they are influencing voters in a way we don't like.
Okay. Now, can I use a very, very bad word starting with a C letter? It's censorship. Would that be a fair price, censorship, for getting more security in the digital space?
Well, it's not censorship. I would say accountability for your words, right? I mean, same way. There's in the United States, you have the First Amendment, which obviously takes a lot of boundaries off. Most countries in Europe do have boundaries and laws in terms of libel, in terms of whatever else. And so, I mean, I think it's also looking at and holding them to that, right?
Work to a very limited extent.
Because, well, we have the bots and trolls that are also paid by Russia, for example, and what can we do with this?
The trend for that is down anyways, right? I mean, you can see more organic disinformation than you can the manufactured one at this point, right? I mean, it's kind of like the ecosystem has taken on its own life. So again, I would stop looking backwards to certain things and just look forward to what the upcoming threats are a little bit.
Just on this, I think it's important to insist, who's censoring? Right now, the platforms are censoring people. Platforms are taking arbitrary decisions about what's on their platform and what is not. they're taking their
It
choice.
is part of a disinformation campaign.
This is part of. They are deciding. What we ask and what the European regulation is asking is like, why are they removing content?
Okay.
And they have to
Now,
actually justify this in front of the law.
I know the two other chairs are missing. We just have one political chair in this program. But can we, as Europe, can we do something about it? Do we have enough guts to actually control the big techs? Exactly the thing that you're talking about.
We need a dialogue with them because they should understand what we are afraid of, first of all. The second is that currently we have a war at our borders. So we have to be very careful what's happening and we have to react without delays. For instance, there was a case in Lithuania. There was disinformation on that Lithuania is leaving NATO.
Yes.
So this was a case when the government was asked to react immediately. So I think it's very important that both the governments and the EU institutions work together, being in a contact and being in a dialogue with civil society, with NGOs. But also with companies working on this issue.
But exactly what you said, we have the war on our border, where I believe that we have a war in our soil, maybe not with the tanks, but with the war
that's
on
hybrid
our
war.
weaponized
It's actually
hybrid
taking
war.
place here,
We've been saying,
including
the video. So what is happening with this, right? Are we able to make our society resilient? Do you think that there is enough of awareness, but also are the services working?
We should also say one word, which is education. So we need also to invest in education. People need to understand how the new technologies are working.
Yes.
And this education should be delivered not only to the young people, to the youngsters, but also to the old generation. Sometimes they cannot check what is false and what is right. And also this group of our society should be
targeted with
exactly.
this kind of... You worked in education before, didn't you, Joanna?
Yeah.
Just a question. We know it works, but we know it works in the long run, and this is a thing happening right now and right here.
Do we have enough time?
I mean, you're looking at the next generation,
Exactly.
right? And I mean, I would say this, and with all respect, media literacy, digital literacy, targeted towards certain susceptible audiences, that's fine. Looking at overhauling of the education system, wondering why there's this gap anyways is also one thing, but it is a large systemic thing. But I would say that's only part of it, right? So, I mean, it's a piece of this puzzle that you want to look at. Okay. But I think that probably you have to look more carefully as to where the vulnerabilities are or why the consumption habits have evolved the way that they have. Not that people will believe the AI-generated deepfakes or whatever, because honestly, that's a separate topic if you want. But why do people actually believe full-out disinformation,
do you know that?
Right?
We do know that already.
I'm not sure.
Not sure.
I don't think not enough. I think that on a certain level, yes, but there's still the attitude is that.
Actually, excuse me. I think Putin knows that very well. He plays the music in, and we perfectly dance to the music that he plays.
Sometimes it seems that he knows us better than we know ourselves.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, that's and that's the fair point.
That's
so maybe it's also it's understanding where the signals are to basically look at it that way a little bit, right? To kind of like clear the fissures and seal the fissures rather than look for something else.
But why Putin should be more clever than we are?
He's not.
No.
I think that's important. That the Russians are not that clever. If you look at the campaigns they're doing, most of them are very poor quality. Narratives are very bad.
But they work.
But they work. There is an erosion of trust, polarization rising.
They work because the system is in place that amplifies this. But the quality of it, honestly, you and I could actually find better ideas and narratives that they have. So the question is more, how is the system helping them? How is the big tech helping that campaigns to actually reach levels that are actually putting in danger our democracies?
Exactly here, I would like to ask you about the narratives, because you were saying like they are not that important. Well, however, I believe that they are. And if we look what Sweden has done with the Swedish Psychological Defense Agency, they are trying to bring this aspect of the psychological awareness, but also of the strategic communication. Why don't we have something like
this in the EU? That's a good blueprint, isn't it? That's a good blueprint for the rest of Europe.
I think replicating what has been done in Sweden, replicating what has been done in Finland. It's all very different countries, and we don't have the same level of trust within governments, within institutions, within civil society, with public media in all of these countries. So I think trying to replicate and look at what Sweden done, what France has been doing, what Spain is doing, is very complex because culturally all member states are very different.
Okay, can I just ask you a very, very specific question? 2 most important concrete steps to take to be able to outsmart not so smart Putin.
To outsmart not so smart Putin?
Yes.
2 concrete steps. That's a good one.
Well, one I think is, again, look at the disenfranchised in your society, right? So, I mean, look at the ones that are vulnerable to it and understand what underlies their consumption habits, right? And so you have to start working on that as well. And the other, frankly, is regulation, right? So you're looking at, how would you say, the human aspect of it, and then technological aspect of it, and then the politicians.
Yeah, regulation.
Yeah, but
Okay, over to you. Regulations, regulations. Politics, in other words.
In this building, we preferred a word simplification, not regulation. So this is a current mood.
Okay.
But coming back to the issue, to the question about what is important. I think we need strong institutions. We need strong democratic institutions, and it's not only obligation for the EU, but I think it's also obligation for NATO. So when I was NATO Parliamentary Assembly President, I was proposing to establish a Democratic Resilience Center at NATO headquarters, because for us, for 32 countries, also a quality of our democracy, protecting our election processes is very important. Also, not only for us, but also for the applicant countries.
So, if we're talking about the future right now and what we can do, like, let's forget about the past, Joanna, you have said, let's think about the future. If you were right now to build from scratch the European democracy, knowing how disinformation
That's
works.
a big task. That's a big task.
But, well, we can dream, right? Knowing how disinformation works, what would you put there as the key?
Invest massively in plurality of media with the capacity to actually get revenue for what they produce, which has been captured in the past 15 years by big tech corporations. So rebuild public and private media with capacity to live from their revenue, build academic and civil society research that is capable of knowing what's happening, build justice and prosecution to chase the accountable people for spreading disinformation, whereas there are structural platforms or organizations, and sometimes criminal organizations that are infringing the law. That's the 3 pillars.
Would there be any example at all in any country in the world that would be the closest to the case that you have just described?
I think we have bits. I think in France we have seen how putting pressure on a platform like Telegram helped to have better way of knowing what criminal organizations were actually hosted on that thing. We have seen in Sweden and in Finland how investing in education, in resilience, can help populations to be more ready for that. We have seen in Germany, in Poland, that capacity to, or in Romania, capacity to analyze what's happening was important to actually have data available. So I think we have bits of responses here and there. It's not going to appear like a mushroom by magic, but I think putting everything there in these already first corners will help to have some coordinated response.
It's terrifying that it's actually so cheap to go on with disinformation campaigns. It's a really, really cheap kind of weapon.
It builds on fertile soil. I mean, I'll keep repeating that, right? I mean, disinformation only works when there's an underlying problem and there's an underlying weakness. So that's where the campaigns work. So that's why they also have Finland as a good example. But again, it's because you have higher social trust in institutions. There's a social cohesion that exists within that society. Is it replicable? They also have a very particular situation. I agree with Alexandre. You can't translate all of these things, but you can at least understand what the mechanisms that keep them whole are.
It's cheap because if you don't have to have deontology, if you don't need to pay for lawyers, if you don't, because you don't care about all of these steps that are actually costing money, yes, it's cheap to do everything. Actually, it's cheap to do any kind of business if you decide to not follow any regulation and any law. So the question is not cheap. The question is like how people that are cheating are being caught.
And well, right now we have ChatGPT that you can basically ask for some narratives and getting it quite easily. And the other AI and new technologies are being built as well. And again, we as humans are not understanding if what we see is true or not. And that has changed. That never happened before.
Yeah, we know it, and we know that these deepfake videos, political videos, were used in different countries. So we understand it. We know that it's used, but at the same time, responding is not enough. And coming back to your question about what we can do, I think it's strategic communication, which is necessary. We know Putin's narrative and we know Putin's storytelling, but first of all, we have to invest in communication with EU citizens. We need to invest in education, and this is very important because if we know exactly how it was working and what tools were used 5 years ago when Brexit happened, probably this will not happen now because we know exactly what was the narrative, the tools.
Sure.
However, Romania has happened pretty much based on the similar,
almost.
So, you know,
in the first elections,
happened
right?
yesterday, really.
Yeah.
It is. We had this talk before we started this program about fact-checking. Some of you remember mentioned fact-checking as part of the weaponry to combat the misinformation. But in fact, we concluded together that it doesn't really work, fact-checking, even though it's a nice story to tell.
Media needs it as well. That's the obligation. But other than that,
I think we need to look at the whole of a system approach. If we're hoping that fact-checking is a silver bullet to solve anything, that's not.
That's not true.
Many academics are actually using fact-checking to actually retro-engineer what kind of disinformation was made, how viral it was, what was the narratives, and to better understand this.
So fact-checking for the media rather than for citizens, rather than for people.
So we need to understand the whole chain of value of things. It's not one small action that's going to change everything, but like the combination of these actions is important. So putting all your money now in fact-checking is not the solution. Yeah. And putting all your money in education is actually not a good solution either. Yeah. So the question now is the balance and the cooperation that can be around.
And we have to put science high on our agenda because
that's true.
Information should be based on knowledge.
And how to strengthen the trust, because that's the key issue as well.
And the most complicated, right? I mean, they always say trust takes years and years to build and it takes 5 seconds to destroy, right? So I think that you have to acknowledge that there's a system that's broken in it and look at, you know, a lot of the approaches, including on media literacy, is based on the assumption that, well, if people knew if they had real information, they would make better decisions or they wouldn't believe it. And that's also not true, right? So this is the whole fact-checking aspect of it from using it as a stratcom perspective, is that people are a little bit tired of the propaganda. I mean, that might be the one hope in terms of the deepfakes or whatever, is that I was kind of thinking that things have become so ridiculous that maybe the level of skepticism is so high that at some point it's going to start counterbalancing the other way on an optimistic point of view. But
Alexander,
I think we need to acknowledge it's going to take years, and it's going to take years of permanent and actually increased work. But we're not going to solve this. And the issue we have right now is we have also an information ecosystem which is built on speed. And of course, and we mentioned strategic communications, now every also stakeholder is trying to rush for more comms without action.
Let's imagine we meet here in this studio, in this program, 2 years from now. What would you like to see happen over the course of the next couple of years so that the situation gets better? You've got 45 seconds to finish.
I'd like to see the emergence of new social media, if you want, right? So something that's a counterbalance to the current ones and better regulation on the current ones.
I would like to see competition of way to access news and more pluralistic news in Europe.
We need not just press releases, but as I said, we need strategic communication, and which is not only responding, it's about also understanding what can happen in the future.
So we have some of the appeals for it, hopefully being put in
put it all down. Well, Michał Szczerba, Joanna Rochocińska, and Alexandra Philippe.
Thank you.
It's worth to remember that we are not helpless in combating disinformation. But of course, it takes education and also political decisions.
Well, decisions taken both in the individual countries and here in the European Union.
The Polish presidency showed the security is fundamental and the EU has an obligation to protect its people, not only from external threats, but also from the slow erosion of trust that comes from inside.
Well, that's it from us today. That was a special edition of Anatomy of Disinformation from the European Parliament in Brussels. For now, goodbye.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Goodbye.